were the Rev Up campaign from the American Association of People with Disabilities, the hashtag I Help Veterans from Disabled American Veterans, and the Snack Zone from the Special Olympics. I based my choices of disability advocacy groups on 4 criteria. Number 1, the group has to be located in the United States. Number 2, the advocacy group has to have an active campaign dedicated to the betterment of people with disabilities. Number 3, the group has a priority for disability advocacy. And number 4, the group should have a prominent role in digital media. In my thesis, I discussed the differences between traditional and digital advocacy and how the campaigns have implemented effective digital strategies. From my past experiences with the online disability community, I knew I wanted to focus on digital media as that is the fastest way to disseminate information. When analyzing the information I pulled from the 3 campaigns, there were 3 ideas that were common among them. The first one is the fostering of community engagement and collaboration. Through Rev Up, I Help Veterans and Snack Zone, the voices of marginalized individuals are amplified, addressing various issues such as voter suppression and health disparities. Leveraging digital platforms, these initiatives aim to reach broader audiences and facilitate dialogue on. However, challenges such as organizational fragmentation and insufficient outreach may hinder their effectiveness. Despite these obstacles, from campaigns emphasize the importance of self-advocacy and encourage active participation in civic engagement activities. By promoting inclusive dialogue and collective action, they strive to ensure that all individuals have equal opportunities and access to resources regardless of their circumstances. The second one is humanizing personal narratives. Campaigns, especially those focusing on issues like disability rights, leverage personal narratives to connect with people on a deeper level, fostering empathy and understanding. These stories humanize the challenges faced by marginalized communities and inspire collective action. Advocacy groups, such as the DAV and AAPD, showcase individual stories to highlight their impact and encourage support. However, while personal narratives are powerful, they also carry risks, including potential backlash and oversimplification of complex issues. It's vital to balance storytelling with systemic analysis to address root causes effectively. Personal narratives serve as a catalyst for change, driving meaningful action towards a more equitable society. Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century, edited by Alice Wong, is the pinnacle of disabled voices. A.H. Rome, disability activist and author, had an essay featured that is the standard of amplifying disabled voices. Quote, "But we need more disabled voices. We need more disabled voices, not just because disabled people are brilliant and talented and have so much to offer and say, but also because disabled people face an incredible amount of dehumanizing ableism that shapes and destroys their lives. And one of the best ways to combat that is through stories." And the third way is was a unified call for systemic change. Campaigns advocating for systemic change focus on addressing root causes rather than just treating symptoms. This approach, exemplified by campaigns like DAV and RevUp, recognize the interconnected nature of societal issues and aim for comprehensive transformations. However, individual actions alone may not suffice to tackle systemic barriers. Collaborative efforts like Snack Zone's Inclusive Snack Initiative and RevHub's grassroots organizing demonstrate the importance of systemic advocacy. Yet challenges such as resistance to change and overlooking marginalized voices persist. Despite these obstacles, persistent advocacy for systemic change lays the foundation for a fairer and more equitable society. Disability advocacy campaigns demonstrate resilience and dedication, using personal narratives to highlight change and complexities within the community. They emphasize collaboration, amplify voices, and challenge systemic barriers. They emphasize collaboration through community engagement and digital media to aim for better communication and coordination. Humanizing personal stories inspire collective action but come with risks. Advocacy efforts also push for systemic change, aiming to empower marginalized communities despite challenges. Continuing evolution and adaptation are crucial for achieving inclusivity and disability advocacy, leveraging various platforms to amplify voices and drive change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We would like to entertain one question for each project tonight. So if anyone would like to ask a question. Jennifer's work. Oh, come on, someone's got it.
I guess I
Please, go.
Thanks for the presentation. I guess I would like to hear more about how the kind of personal narrative works with the larger systemic critique in these projects. So like how are the narratives used to kind of enhance campaigns, or like how do they fit within the kind of framework of the
So they fit within the narrative because a lot of people are driven towards like empathy.
Right.
And a lot of the reason that, people will, donate money to an organization is because they hear a personal story that someone tells or something that just seems so personal that it resonates with them.
And that draws them into
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Our next presenter is Wendell Tom. And I will let Professor Yang introduce Wendell.
Hi everyone. So I have the pleasure of introducing you to Wendell Tom's presentation today on how corporations communicate trust through their CSR reporting. So CSR is corporate social responsibility, referring to companies' environmental, social, and governance practices to be more responsible towards the society and to practice ethical and sustainable business. So specifically, Wendell did a case study of the two large retail firms, and he content analyzed extensive CSR reports, and he identifies specific strategies that these firms use to communicate CSR in a trustworthy manner and to enhance their credibility. So please congratulate Wendell on his great accomplishment.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My thesis titled How Companies Communicate CSR to Gain Trust, a study on Walmart and Amazon, delves into the complex dynamics of CSR communication strategies utilized by two retail giants, Walmart and Amazon. This study aims to comprehensively explore how retail companies convey their CSR initiatives in their CSR reports to build trust. It addresses a gap in existing research by focusing specifically on this aspect, which has been relatively understudied. By scrutinizing the communication strategies of Walmart and Amazon, this research endeavors to shed light on the nuanced approaches employed by retail giants to enhance trust through CSR communication. First, we'll look at the literature review I completed, followed by the methodology used. Then we'll discuss the findings, and I will offer some practical suggestions from my research. An overview of the literature review as it regards to how companies communicate CSR to gain trust suggests several elements used by companies, such as the utilization of social media for CSR communication. Companies recognize the importance of legitimacy in CSR initiatives, cultural adaptation, and strategic communication strategies. Using other communication tools such as annual reports, responding to negative comments effectively, the utilization of social media influencers in communicating CSR initiative is a new phenomenon, and company cause fit in CSR practices. which is utilized within the fashion industry. Utilization of social media for communication. Companies are leveraging dedicated CSR Facebook pages to share the CSR initiatives. Varying industry engagement levels on CSR Facebook pages depend on the posted topic. Social media platforms are used for detailed CSR information and interactive content. Aligning CSR initiative with company mission enhances engagement and trust. Importance of legitimacy in CSR. Legitimacy in CSR is crucial for companies to gain support from stakeholders. CSR builds trust by conforming to societal forms and fostering strong relationships. Genuine, transparent CSR aligns with societal expectation is essential for building trust. Cultural adaptation and strategic communication. Cultural adaptation, strategic communication, and alignment with societal expectations are vital for building stakeholder trust through CSR. Effective communication of CSR achievements through tailored print ads foster trust and engagement. Companies like Chevron and Banco Real gain trust through culturally adapted and strategically communicated CSR initiatives. Using other communication tools such as annual reports. Annual reports serve as communication tools for voluntary disclosure of CSR initiatives. Transparent communication of CSR in annual reports demonstrates commitment to ethical practices and builds trust among stakeholders. Responding to negative comments. This is used through two-sidedness communication. Companies must effectively respond to negative comments about CSR campaigns to maintain trust. Utilization of a two-sided response strategy, especially when starting out, builds trust by demonstrating sincerity. How companies handle criticism significantly impacts the stakeholder trust in CSR efforts. Utilization of social media influencers, SMIs. Social media influencers play a crucial role in endorsing CSR initiatives and building trust. Consumers trust SMI's judgment and feel connected to them, influencing their support for CSR initiative. Source credibility is essential for developing public trust in CSR, highlighting the importance of trustworthy and legitimate sources. Company cause fit. This term in CSR initiative refers to the alignment between a company's CSR efforts and the social or environmental causes they support. It is important for companies to choose CSR initiatives that resonate with their values, mission, and core business activities. When there is a strong company cause fit, CSR initiatives tend to be more authentic, impactful, and sustainable. For example, sustainability has become mainstream in the fashion industry, with CSR initiatives like Sustainable Fashion Collection, for example, luxury fashion and fast fashion. Luxury fashion is where the company actually use materials in where the product is long-lasting. It doesn't deteriorate very fast. Fast fashion is where they use material in their products in where it can be recyclable. CSR campaign focus on environmental issues aligned with consumer expectation. Fashion brands' CSR efforts, especially environmental initiatives, help build reputation and trust among customers. Effective CSR communication involves diverse strategies tailored to the context and audience, prioritizing transparency, authenticity, and stakeholder engagement. In summary, these studies emphasize the significance of effective CSR communication strategies in building and maintaining stakeholder trust across various industries. This case study employs a content analysis of two reports, Walmart 2023 ESG report and Amazon 2022 ESG report, which are displayed on the company's websites. These two companies were selected because they were the top retail companies on the 2023 Fortune 500 list. Using qualitative content analysis through an inductive approach, different categories of trust building tactics were developed as they emerged. The unit of analysis was each page of the report. The codes that emerged throughout the analysis were the following: positive image creation, diversity, equity, inclusiveness, DEI statements, statements of aspirations, core value standard statements, statements of achievements, and statement of engagement advocacy, and source credibility, which could be which was manifested in quantitative or visual data, legitimacy of source, and leadership. Statements that were framed to create positive impression of the company or create a positive balance around the company's image were coded as positive image creation. Essentially, if the statement is designed to paint the company in a favorable light or to highlight its positive aspects, it's labeled as contributing to the creation of a positive image of the company. DEI statements in the report reflected the company's ESG initiatives relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This could be statements of having a workforce comprising of a particular percentage of women or people of color, or diversified recruiting and talent pools. Statement of aspiration reflect the company's vision for a sustainable and responsible future regarding ESG initiative, such as the goals or targets the company would like to pursue to meet each ESG initiative. Core value standard statements are statements in the ESG report which emphasize the company's values or moral compass. Such words or phrases telling of the company's ethical standards and codes of conduct, such as Walmart's saying, "We're giving back, we're leaving things better than we found it," or Amazon talking about, "We seek to be good neighbors wherever we operate and to support local people and charitable organizations." Statement of achievement refer to narratives that highlight the accomplishments, progress, or milestone achieved by the company in relation to its sustainability, social responsibility, and governance initiative. Engagement or advocacy statements in the ESG report communicate ways the company engage stakeholders or advocates for particular policies as it relates to ESG initiative, with keywords such as encouraging, advocating, collaborating with, engaging with. The second classification of statements in the report is called source credibility. These are statements which use strong support to communicate the company's effort towards ESG initiative. This classification was subdivided into three types: the use of quantitative data, visual data, legitimacy, and leadership. Statements that use quantitative or visual data are statements or charts in the report giving a quantifiable amount or measurement of any ESG initiatives or outcome using numbers, numerical signs, fractions, and percentages. Statement of legitimacy are statements in the report where the company align themselves with reputable and prestigious organization to gain reputational points as it relates to ESG initiative, such as the UN or the International Labour Organization. Statements of leadership sources are statements in the report which communicated the presence or the involvement of the company's top-level executive in the ESG initiatives or report. It refers to declarations or assertions made by the company leadership regarding their commitment to sustainability, social responsibility, and ethical governance practices. These statements serve as a source of credibility for stakeholders by demonstrating the company's dedication to ESG principles, such as CEO messages or board of directors statements.
And we're just at time,
So some of the key findings, it was evidence of top-level leadership involvement. Both Walmart and Amazon's ESG report began with letters statement from top-level executive demonstrating a commitment to sustainability at the highest level. Walmart and Amazon utilized statements of aspiration to their reports to articulate company's vision for driving positive change. For example, Walmart stated, "We aim to galvanize collection action across the retail and consumer goods sector through advocacy," while Amazon outlined its goal by stating, "We aim to reach net zero carbon emission by 2020." Both Amazon and Walmart included statements of DEI to highlight their efforts towards promoting diversity and inclusion in their workforce. These statements were always accompanied by statements of quantitative data in order to quantify their level of success in ESG initiative. For example, Amazon stated they partnered with BSR's Corp project to provide health and financial skill training to 21,000 workers, including 14,000 women. Both companies again use statements of engagement or advocacy to showcase their commitment to collaborating with others to achieve sustainability goals. For example, Walmart highlights its supplier leadership program on people by stating over 400 suppliers set goals and reported progress on responsibility recruitment through Walmart Supplier Leadership Program. Walmart and Amazon use statements referring to their source of legitimacy in their reports to enhance the credibility of their ESG initiative. Walmart dedicates a full page in its report to communicate prestigious awards and recognition received from the organization. Walmart and Amazon effectively communicate their commitment to sustainability through structured reports and highlight achievement, goals, and partnership, while leveraging top-level leadership involvement and recognition to enhance credibility. Practical recommendation. Based on my research, these are my practical recommendations for corporate leaders and managers in the retail sector to bolster stakeholder trust through effective communication of ESG initiative. They should leverage positive image creation and source credibility by proactively communicating ESG efforts, highlighting commitment to sustainability, showcasing endorsement from reputable sources. They should craft statement of aspiration with clear vision by developing long-term sustainability goals. They should use quantitative and visual data to showcase achievement by incorporating data into communication materials. They should engage top executives in ESG initiatives by encouraging active involvement and visible leadership, referencing executive leadership in communication. They should also emphasize legitimacy through accolades and honors by showcasing accolades from respected institutions, highlighting affiliation with prestigious organizations. I would like to thank Dr. Yang, Dr. Biwat, and Dr. Medved for their guidance and support for this process.
Professor Yang, you do have a mug if you'd like to. So thank you. It was wonderful to have you. We're going to skip a question, if you don't mind. And we all want to just say, as we're going through tonight, we will be keeping time with Professor Bishop and Professor Mitta. And please apologize to everyone in advance if we do one of these. Close it up, please. Just because we have so many presentations tonight, we want to enjoy them all. So pardon if we look like we're doing cutting, okay? But it was a delight. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
And acknowledging the schedule, while Rupa is pulling out the presentation, I have a pleasure of introducing my wonderful student for 3 terms actually now. We started collaboration a year ago in the fall. So 2 classes, independent study, and then the journey of the thesis. And it's such a pleasure to, enter the journey of thesis with the student with whom you have already established the trust and the relationship. And with Rupa particularly, she is a godless writer and deep thinker. So I was very excited when she suggested her topic, where she marries actually her very well-founded experience in international affairs, foreign policy, to the gap she saw in the corporate sector. So Rupa, floor is yours.
And since there's always some technical something, Canva isn't cooperating, so we're just gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for that introduction. And yes, my study is about the need for developing a global policy for multinational corporations. And before I continue, let me clarify what I mean by global policy. Fix that for you. So imagine you're the CEO of a multinational corporation like Apple or Unilever or Dior. And imagine looking at global operations while following current events. And imagine trying to make sense of shifting dynamics of not only the global workplace, but of contemporary global world order. So let's face it, we are experiencing a significant transformation as well as disruptions across political, economic, social, and technological domains. And it's the successful multinational corporation that will hone in on international dynamics and weave together into their core operations what we can call an organizational global strategy. And this approach, this strategy will do two things. One, it will help them smoothly operate within foreign markets by understanding the diverse workforce, diverse stakeholders, and what makes them tick. And then two, this policy will ensure they thrive wherever they are, wherever they go, by being savvy about the global big picture. And this is through smart corporate diplomacy and careful geopolitical checks. So this is probably the right time to let all of you know that this topic and this idea is bigger than what a master's thesis can cover. But let's have a glance at what was revealed in my research. I interviewed leaders and experts in both the public and private sectors to gain perspectives about current global affairs, intercultural exchange, and how to navigate international markets. And what I uncovered were some key ideas for successful corporate global policy, no matter where it was practiced. And following these ideas can give multinationals a leg up against the competition. So what are some of the key findings? Adapt. Adapt to new markets. Embrace localization, both internally and externally. Strategy that works in the US will not necessarily work in Singapore or Nigeria or even France. Knowing why and knowing how to calibrate expectations and strategic initiatives is imperative. Next, the data tells the story. Through research and harmonizing qualitative and quantitative data, this is what leads to more robust global strategies. And then cultural sensitization. This is a big one because it encompasses overcoming biases and stereotypes. And it requires recalibrating attitudes and learning, always learning. Learning about people, learning about markets, learning about different modes of operating. And the multiple interviewees explained how critical it is to have cultural understanding and indeed more educational initiatives for all stakeholders to remain successful and competitive. So based on this, here are a few recommendations I have for developing an adaptive global policy. So the first is be curious. Know thy neighbor. Integrate intercultural communication competencies and language learning into your everyday. This is advantageous and necessary. And leaders, know thyself. Know your company values. Know your employees' values. Focus on gaining trust by remaining attentive and vigilant to shifting world dynamics. And then develop a business case for your global policy. This requires knowing the business, understanding all stakeholders, and being clear about objectives. And know how to align global strategic initiatives with tangible outcomes, especially if there's something worth doing on a company-wide or global scale. So to conclude, an adaptive global policy is the intersection of multiple relevant policies and a reflection of an organization's understanding of itself in a global context. Thank you.
Thank you. Because you've kept the time so well, I believe we have time for that one question.
Anyone a CEO? Soon. Okay.
So that was preemptive.
All right.
just say a quick word? We just heard from security in this building that we actually can't get additional chairs in this room just because of the way the regulations work. So just want to invite anyone who feels like they may want to stretch their legs as we go along at any point to give folks in the back a chance. We can just kind of creatively handle this until we've got enough space. So if you need a seat, feel free to wave your hand. And if you want to stretch your legs and are sitting down, feel free to offer your seat. And thank you all for being here. Yeah, thank you for being here. Let us know.
Well, while everyone's getting more things set up, I'll start with the introductions. I have had the distinct pleasure to work with Ria over the course of 2 semesters, and this semester helping her through this thesis process. Her topic is, as you will soon learn, neuromarketing, which is very, very interesting. And not only has the quality of her research been spectacular, but I have been so deeply impressed by the way that she's taken that research and created a robust toolkit for small businesses to use. So I will let her take it away and share all the details about her work.
Technical difficulties.
And while you're doing that, let me just mention too, if you haven't had a chance to meet Gibson Oakley and Vern Oakley, who have taught our organizational storytelling class last fall.
Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful to have them with us, so thank you for doing that.
Hi everyone, introduce myself again, I'm Zaria Cuffy. And to start it off, I want anyone you can just randomly say it out loud. For my cover slide, can you tell me what you're thinking or what you're feeling? And I know it's a color, I know it's orange, but what are you thinking with just this orange slide?
Creamsicle.
I'm interested.
Shake. Happiness. Ball.
Fall, okay.
Oceans.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so today I will present to you the hidden connection of visuals, messaging, and the human side for marketing purposes. So before I dive deep into my presentation, I'm going to share 2 key terms that I'll be referencing throughout my presentation. So the first one is neuromarketing, and that's a merge of neuroscience and marketing. Essentially, it's used to get to learn consumers what they're thinking to understand their buying habits. Then brand loyalty. So that's consumers' way of their preference to a specific brand or a specific product. Scrolling. And getting to my actual presentation, I will be talking to you about neuromarketing, drawing on emotions to cultivate unbreakable brand loyalty. So the objective of the study is to just examine the theoretical foundations and the practical applications of neuromarketing, connecting it to consumers' emotions. Let me know if you can see the entire slide. I think
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So just giving you a little background of what neuromarketing entails. So for the first box you see here is functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and then you also have EEG. So as the image kind of shows you, there's like a headset and an eyewear. And larger companies, because they have the money to, fund these resources, they use like a target audience, put the headset on, and they're able to see what they're scanning, what they're looking at, what they like from a product, what they like from the messaging. And that's able to tailor their campaign messaging or their products. And then we have more practical tactics such as color psychology, which is why I kind of asked you what you see from a color, because we don't really realize when you see a color like blue, you see a lot of like fun, financial, because it makes you feel safe, orange, bright, happy. So that's the tactic that a lot of companies use for their websites and their logos. Another thing, loss aversion, a lot of you may know it as FOMO, fear of missing out. So you'll see like promotion like last chance, buy now, get now. You feel like you miss out on it, you're missing something big. So a lot of companies use that strategy as well. And then lastly, emotional storytelling. So that's mostly used for like commercials or videos, and it strings along either fear or like happiness. For example, if you have a fear and a product addresses your fear, you're gonna want to buy it. So a lot of the messaging takes the emotions of consumers to drive purchase. So the purpose of this study, I took this from like a correlation between emotional driven communication and cultivating consumers' actions. From the strategies, each of them have in common is stringing on some type of emotion. So the aim of this study is to unveil the examples and current strategies from neuromarketing and to see how it can influence the preference or the brand perception of a consumer. So as mentioned before, a lot of large companies use this. So my goal, I wanted to alter it to small businesses, see how small businesses can take these strategies and help their business as well. However, I did realize a lot of people consider this as manipulation because, you know, companies are manipulating your mind and you don't know of it. So I recommend using connective communication, which is more connective strategy to connect with your consumers. You know, you're telling your real story to real people instead of, you know, just trying to analyze their brain. So from my research, I adapted through interviewing 4 small business owners, and I learned 3 top insights. Competitive landscape, a lot of small business owners, they felt the challenge of competing against large companies, ineffective marketing strategies, they don't really know what's gonna help them in order to get revenue. And then lack of time, a lot of small business owners have a full-time job and they're doing it as a side, so they don't have the time to allocate to their marketing strategies. So with that, as this capstone project, I developed a toolkit, starting with a website. Has everybody heard of like the talking stage? It's like this modern dating term. Okay. So if you don't know what it is, like in modern dating, you know, it's a stage between like acquaintance and like a loyal, committed relationship. Now I kind of played it on because not a lot of people get to the not a lot of people get to the relationship stage. So I use this for marketing. This is a period where small businesses are getting to know their consumers. And then to play on it, I just use building relationships with the consumers that actually go somewhere, because dating may not go anywhere. So I developed a training course consisting of 4 different videos. First, introducing what neuromarketing is, what connective communication is, allowing small business owners to really understand what they are getting into, and then also audience insight, how to learn your audience, and then connective communication of the strategies to implement. I'll show you a quick clip of lesson 3. Oh, is the audio on?
Oh, he got cranked on the system.
Bottom right.
Of your customer's needs or desires, then crafting a message that is tailored to the solution that only your business can uniquely solve. The first step, and probably the most important step, is to know who your customer is. Just like in the talking stage, you ask basic questions of what is your favorite color, but instead, what is your favorite social media platform? This way, you're getting to learn their platforms, how to reach them, the channels to tune into. So that way, you and your customer can start building that connection. Okay, so like I said, each video kind of walks small businesses through. Oh, I think I'm a little too hard here. This is through different strategies. I also included industry examples so they can see that larger companies like Apple, McDonald's, and Always are using these strategies as well for their marketing communications. And as mentioned before, I interviewed 4 different small business owners, some that are in Atlanta, New York City, Montreal, Canada. I went to different networking events trying to find these people. And basically what I wanted to do was find a diverse point of view, understand the marketing challenges, because like before, you need to understand who your audience is and what they need. So I had to do the same and to learn, you know, common challenges. So I created like a connective community. So those small business owners who do want to find a community with the same challenges, they can help one another. So I can just scroll down and show you an interview. Let me know if I'm at time. Oh, and thank you, Gibson. He's sending out QR codes to the website so you can scan and view the website on yourself. And this is Musu Beauty. She is. I am Chief Brand Officer at Thesis. It's a body care brand that is rooted in West Africa's holistic practices. Really an intergenerational love story. Shea butter is such a key ingredient and a key aspect of part of our culture and our community. Some of the marketing challenges, I think, because the brand is like niche in a way, right? Where it's like a very specific, coming from a very specific culture, very specific background. I think sometimes it's hard translate that level of care who may not of that specific cultural community. And also I think when we market, we are always faced with the challenge of like, how do we make it make sense to the people that we want it to make sense to? So just to sum it up, thank you. Just to sum it up, she is a small business owner with a niche product and trying to tell her story to consumers. So she herself have a little background of emotional storytelling. So working with her, I was able to see what she knows and what neuromarketing tactics that I can provide and share to help her business as well. I also have quotes from her. And then again, if you scroll through, you'll see other businesses from apparel. Scroll. Another business, plush dolls. And then something else like a more local mom and pop shop, Jerry's Pizza. So I'm getting diverse answers from everyone trying to cultivate how I can help small business owners. And I think that is about it because I'm off on time, but thank you everyone.
Any questions?
So what was one of the most challenging aspects when you were talking with some of these small businesses and explaining neuromarketing?
So I think one of the challenges were to actually, so for example, Jerry's Pizza, he's an older man, so trying to taking it back and explaining like some modern marketing strategies. I wouldn't say it was challenging, but it allowed me to
bring us to the office at least 2 days a week. And they're trying to extend it into 3 days a week. And even 2 days, we are dragging ourselves out of the house to go to the office and then to survive throughout the day. So here come my thesis back to the office and U.S. employee reluctance and re-engagement strategy. With the announcements of the end of COVID-19 public health emergency declarations of May 11, 2023 by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, pandemic era was concluded in the U.S. And we have heard several news on the organizations pushing the employees back to the office, and employees, when they got pushed, they are quitting as well. A lot of news media are covering on that one, and we have seen a lot. So the transition from remote work to returning to the office post-pandemic has been causing significant challenges to the organizations. So this study proposes to explore why the employees are reluctant to go back to the office and what are the effective communication strategies that organizations can pursue in order to successful re-engagements back to the office with the employees. These are the main purpose of my research. With that purpose, the study laid out 2 research questions. What are the reasons employees prefer remote work over returning to the office? And what communication strategy have proven successful in engaging and motivating employees to return to the office? To answer the main questions, how can organizations effectively attract employees back to the office following extended periods of remote work? To answer the questions, I use a qualitative approach through an online survey conducted via quadrants to gather data on employee perceptions, preference, concerns, and attitudes towards returning to the office. The comprehensive survey designs comprise structured questions integrating both closed-ended questions and open-ended questions to gather the qualitative data and also quantitative data as well. It gives us spectrum of data and a lot of insights in the qualitative and also quantitative to explore the emotions and the experience of the employees regarding the shift back to the office-based work. The survey had 17 questions, including screening, consents, and the core questions. The core questions composed of 4 sections, each addressing one of the research questions and embracing both scale questions, the quantitative data, and open-ended questions, the qualitative data. This thesis uses a snowball method of sampling, which allows for the recruitment of participants with diverse perspective and experience. There were a total of 80 respondents in 3-week period. Thank you so much all who took my survey. Appreciate it. It was really hard. Thank you. And 41 respondents met all the criteria being a full-time employment, working in the US, and recent remote work experience and office work requirement, and they gave me consent to participate in this research and also to store their data as well. Thank you so much, those four respondents. I really appreciate it a lot. Because this thesis is trying to find out people's perspective, opinions, and experience from survey resulted data. I apply the thematic analysis. The data of 41 qualified participants were analyzed by the thematic analysis, focusing on interpreting and identifying recurrent themes, pattern, and subjective experience embedded within the open-ended questions. Coding was employed to systematically categorize and organize the data as well. So as a result, as mentioned above, the core questions compose 4 sections, each addressing one of the research questions. For the first research questions, what are the reasons employees prefer remote work over returning to the office? The first sessions asks participants a scale questions if they are satisfied with the remote work experience or not. And very surprisingly, 0% of the respondents were unsatisfied with the remote work. So we all enjoy the remote work. It's safe to say that 53% were satisfied with the remote work experience. Then an open-ended questions of reasons of remote work preference was followed to understand why they prefer remote work. Many similar responses were focused on productivity, such as one of the respondents mentioned that more productive and because the home setting is more comfortable for them. And another, and many highlighted about the flexibility, like flexibility to help out my family or my house chore. Such kind of answers were repeatedly seen, and those similar answers were coded as 8 different codes. By analyzing codes, we concluded there are 4 main themes of employees' preference for remote work. The work efficiencies and focus theme emerged as the most frequent, representing 32% of responses. This theme represents the importance that employees place on productivity, focus, and flexibility in their work arrangement. Understanding these preferences is crucial for organizations when they address employee reluctance to return to office and diverse effective communication strategy, and then prioritize the work efficiency and well-being. Another core question sessions asks about the concerns and barriers. Similar structure as above sessions, first we ask the scaling close-ended questions like, how comfortable are you with the idea of returning back to the office? And then it's also very interesting result as well. Majority at 45% were extremely uncomfortable with the idea of returning back to the office. And then only 3% were very comfortable with the idea of returning back to the office. And needing the quiet space and no time to do things in between the meetings, one respondent highlighted. And another respondent calling out about the work environment, and they mentioned that I'm immunocompromised, so I have enjoyed not having wear a mask while working, and calling out that health and safety were repeatedly seen in the responses. So we can see 3 main themes emerge out of the 5 codes. The work environment and productivity theme and health, safety, and work-life balance theme emerged as the most frequent themes, representing 40% each of the respondents. These themes points out the critical aspects of employee concerns and priorities as they navigate the transition back to the office. Effective communication strategy plays a very crucial role in addressing those concerns and creating a positive re-engagement experience for the employees. Because now we understand the reasons why employees are reluctant back to the office, the following 2 core question sessions of the survey explore the effective communication strategies that the organizations are using right now. It is interesting to see that 44% of the respondents thought that the strategy of their organization using right now are very ineffective. And the codes of the communication strategy that are effective for them combine into 3 main themes here. the incentive and benefits, value of in-person interactions, and clarity and communication, transparency, and flexibility. Respondents repeatedly reported that transparency about expectations and ensuring flexibility, giving them incentive and promotions and a raise to compensate for the time they lost while commuting and while preparing to go to the office, were repeatedly found. And then the employees also use the allowing employees to use their own discretions whether or not they need to attend a meeting or in person, comprised as the very effective communication strategies that they are facing, that organizations are using right now. Most importantly, respondents highlighted organizations need to communicate with their employees clearly, explaining why we need to be at the meeting in person instead of remote, and why the in-person is very necessary for these occasions or for this day. It's very interesting again, because like many previous studies mentioned about the hybrid work is widely acknowledged as a very beneficial solution for addressing the employees' reluctance to be back to the office. In this survey, respondents were asked whether hybrid work was beneficial for them, to which a vast majority of 93% responded affirmatively. And two main themes were identified: flexibility and empowerment, and structured hybrid work models. So the survey provided the understandings of employees' attitudes and concerns regarding the returning to the office post-pandemic era. The stark difference between the small percentage, only 3%, were comfortable with the idea, and the majority were very uncomfortable. To facilitate a successful re-engagement, organizations must strategically address these concerns. Flexible work schedule, remote options, and transportation solutions can ease the commute worries. And as the study's findings have practical implications for organizations and HR professionals as well. Enhancing communication transparency, offering incentives aligned with employee needs, and optimizing hybrid work arrangements are key strategies. Clear and empathetic communications build trust, and incentive programs boost morale, and hybrid models accommodate diverse preference, promoting productivity and work-life balance. These findings align with the existing research on employee reluctance and effective communications and hybrid work model as well. Why valuable this thesis has still limitations, such as like small sample size. We only got 41 respondents, respondents, and then potential bias in self-reported data as well. Due to the time frame, I just circulated to the people I know, so most of them are my friends. So we are working in the same organization. So this is a very big limitation for the study. As the future studies can explore the long-term impact of the re-engagement strategies and conduct cross-industry analysis and compare global perspectives on effective practices. These avenues can inform continuous improvement in employee engagement strategy and workplace dynamics. Thank you so much, my advisor.
Any questions for him?
I have one.
So most of the presentation focused on those who were comfortable not going back. Did anything stand out about the three who wanted to go back to work? Any questions?
I think I know who are those persons, but it's very interesting. Is that those 3 persons are senior level as well. So for senior level percentage, it is very important to be in person to discuss the strategy, and it's easier for them as well, like to tag someone in their team as well. So yeah.
Hi everyone. I'm so lucky that this semester I have 3 students that I advise. They all initially developed their topic as a final paper last year in my media analysis class. and they all meet again this semester. 3 of them work every 2 weeks. We meet and workshop their the draft of their right, the draft of their thesis, and it's just so wonderful, and it's such an honor for me to see how they develop the draft, overcome those challenges. Sometimes I become very harsh, but it's you know, it's beautiful how the final product of it. And so I don't usually say this, and I'm sure you all agree, I don't usually miss Zoom meetings, but I'm still gonna miss Zoom meetings with you guys. But here's a question, raise your hand if you watch the comment section of a YouTube video when you watch the YouTube video. Right? And how many of you develop it into a systematic methodology for a very thorough research on the subject? So Catherine Goodhart expands, yes, Stuart, but expands the theory of parasocial relationship and also push and you know, the methodology of critical media literacy to analyze the idea of authenticity in fashion and beauty. And Catherine and I would like to thank Professor Medved for serving as a reader. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right, so first, before I start that time, I guess, so sorry, but I want to thank my parents back at home on Long Island. Sorry you guys couldn't be here, but we had graduation, so that's cool. Didn't want them to commute in for this, so no offense, but it's a lot. And obviously my wonderful professors, thank you so much. And everyone here, it's been such a great support system, so thank you. Okay. So here's my thesis on authenticity in fashion and beauty, influencer marketing, and the development of parasocial relationships on social media. I know it's a mouthful, we will get through this together. Okay, so the purpose of my study is to see how authenticity is a major factor in influencer marketing. And my research questions are, how do social media platforms encourage the development of parasocial relationships, and how does authenticity function in a parasocial relationship? So some terms I wanted to define, because I know it might be a little, you know, iffy. An influencer is a person who creates content on social media, typically for a niche topic. So in this case, fashion and beauty influencers that have an online following, whether it's hundreds, thousands, and millions of people following them. And you can think of an influencer like a celebrity. So what is a parasocial relationship? It's a one-sided relationship, like how a celebrity has a bunch of fans, and those fans know everything about that celebrity and their personal life, what they're doing at all times. And the celebrity knows little to nothing about any of their fans. And my definition of authenticity, shout out to Vernon Gibson Oakley for that, because he wrote a book, it was awesome. Authenticity is being genuine and comfortable and truthful. And influencer marketing is the use of influencers to market a product online, typically on social media. So I did a qualitative media analysis on 5 influencers and did a case study on each of them, because these influencers in the fashion and beauty space all had a scandal involving their content and involving their content that they posted with their brand or a brand. So in this case, I want to focus on one influencer that I think is the strongest, and that would be Susan Yara. Sorry to her if she's watching. My bad. But Susan and the brand Naturium. So as we can see here, in June of 2020, she launched her skincare brand. But in April of 2020, she was promoting products in this skincare brand using words and terms like, this new brand, here's a discount, I really love it, you guys should use it, but never said my skincare brand. Never disclosed that, left that a secret until a few months later. And Jen Love, the video down below, I wouldn't call her an influencer, just a content creator on YouTube who also analyzed this. What I gained the most from her video is that if you could see on the bottom, it says relevant videos. there's a launch video, an apology video, a vitamin C promo, and a niacinamide promo. She deleted the apology video and the vitamin C promo. So those are no longer available, which means she knew she had to apologize, did it, and then said, "Ooh, that looks kind of bad," and then deleted it. And the niacinamide promo, I'll discuss a little bit more in depth on the next slide, but the launch video, I would have analyzed a little bit deeper, but she disabled her comments. So the comments on her video show that the parasocial relationships that these users have with this influencer, they fight with each other in the comments because some of them come to her defense while others think, wow, why didn't you disclose this to us? And the cherry on the cake is that the Federal Trade Commission's Disclosures for Social Media Influencers was published in November of 2019, and those videos were published in 2020. And the FTC's disclosures state that you have to disclose financial, employment, personal, or family relationships with a brand, which she did none of initially. So what have we learned from this and some other influencers that you could read about in my paper? Well, the parasocial relationship can be manipulated for the sake of influencer marketing, and the parasocial relationship is vital in influencer marketing, which also means that authenticity is vital. And that needs to be defined by all stakeholders, including the brands, the influencers, the regulators like the FTC, and commentators like any user on social media. So influencers need to remain authentic, and we need to have greater regulations on influencer marketing. And what can we do to help until that kicks in? Because we really don't know when that's going to happen. We can develop media literacy skills to recognize authenticity when we view influencer marketing on social media, online, any platform, with or without that parasocial relationship being present. So that's it.
We'll take some questions. Stuart, and then
I think we have time for one.
we can
have time for one. No,
two. We can have time for one.
There's 8 more presentations.
It's okay, quick. Oh no. Okay.
Alright, fine. In the case of this influencer, just like in any relationship, there's like, I guess, stress and tribulations. From your research, is it possible for her to authentically come back from this, or is she labeled a liar for the rest of her time online?
Again, very debatable because it's like, to me, she's a liar, but to the people who she already had parasocial relationships developed with that clearly came to her defense, they're never gonna look at her as a liar. And if you look her up, this doesn't come up first. It's pretty hidden. So in doing, like, I knew about this previously, but if you went to look her up, you're gonna see her skincare brand pop up for the scandal about her skincare brand. So, yeah, just weird.
So Catherine did only 6 minutes, so we can have one.
Awesome.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, sometimes. So I wanted to ask about the media literacy component about it. Like, what would that look like in terms of like figuring out like how influencers who are trying their hardest to seem authentic are being authentic? Like, what kind of tests can you develop, or what kind of strategies?
I didn't really develop a test. I just think that we need to develop media literacy because in my research or in the literature review, I found a lot of other people who did stronger data analysis on users and studies focused on the users rather than the case studies. They had a lot more people falling for it. And in their explanations, along with mine, it's just the case of like, they need to know how to not fall for this initially by realizing what can be gauged as authentic versus inauthentic. Yeah.
So this is maybe like future direction of
Yes.
research.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
sure.
I'm just fascinated by the FTC rules about influencers. And I wonder if in your research that's ever been challenged in the courts, because I wonder if I were to write an editorial tomorrow in the New York Times saying, you should all drive hybrid cars because it's better for the environment. Would I have to disclose to the readers that I had stock in Tesla? if I wrote that. And I don't think a lot of people do, so how can these requirements on influencers be any different? It's a good question.
Honestly,
Thank you, Alex.
what I've seen from the FTC is that they kind of did the sly little pass off of like, we're gonna give you these guidelines, but it's up to you to report it when you find it. So in doing this, did I report Yara to the FTC? We don't know. But I don't know.
Well, you should, and then there'll be a challenge to see whether or not the Constitution.
We don't know. So they kind of do a nice sly little pass off of like, we're gonna give you the guidelines, but we're not held responsible for maintaining this. And when you look through their website, I talked about it in the thesis, not in here, short on time, but it was like a whole page dedicated to their cases. And I looked up her brand, I looked up her name, and there was nothing found charging her with anything. Hence why some of her content is still available. So.
Professor Woods will be the last
I'm sorry, I'm just going to build off his question. So these are, you say they're guidelines.
Yeah.
So are these, is this something that's enforceable by the regulatory agency, and have they ever actually enforced it?
They have enforced it
And
because
what does that mean? What did that mean?
that means people are getting fined or they're getting things taken down, but I don't have her financial record, so I can't really see what they did. But also looking through their page of who they have charged, you're able to search for
Got it. So they
brands
do-
and people.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, short on time, would have explained this, read the thesis. So sorry. Thank
As our next presenter is coming up, let me just remind you, so you can read thesis projects, that our students upload their thesis projects to CUNY Academic Works, so you can read anyone's thesis at any time. So that's a wonderful place to go for more information.
And
That's it,
particularly
just-
at the moment when you are going into your thesis process, that is a really great box of treasures to look at. How do they look like actually when they are ready? So let me introduce Yali. Our relationship started actually completely different from Rupa, like a blind date. And it is only to thank Yarli. Who would not love Yarli? It went equally well. So she came with an idea that was super interesting because I had never thought about it. The relationship of generations and work, and then generations and religion and work. So please, Yarli.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, guys. I wanted to thank Professor Min and Professor Bishop for your support. It was really nice working with you too. And I think I have family and friends on live, so. So the title of my thesis is Exploring the Relationship Generation Z Has with Religion and Its Impact on Corporate America. The purpose of this research paper is to explore today's generational differences. Sorry. The purpose of this research paper is to explore today's generational differences in religion and in the workplace, and how these differences impact organizations. By examining these differences, we learn why they exist and what organizations should do to recognize and accommodate them. This research provides organizations with opportunities to improve the overall culture, to attract and retain talent by incorporating and accommodating religion, which is part of employees' personal lives. As I learned through this research, personal lives impact workplace performance, which is why this research I found important. My research follows a meta-analysis methodology where various research studies were analyzed to better understand the perception of the generational groups in the context of religion and workplace. Some of the research that was analyzed included data from all over the world, such as Australia, the United Kingdom, and New Zealand. It was important to understand workplace and religion values through global lenses to understand that this dilemma is not just in the US. The research was divided into 3 topics: generational differences in the workplace, which analyzes how the different generations navigate their careers; generational differences in religion, which examines how the different groups perceive religion; and religion in the workplace, which shows how religion is or is not incorporated in the workplace and its impact on the work in the workplace. Some of the keywords used to obtain research include generations, job satisfaction, workplace spirituality, worker values, generational differences, personal values, cohorts, and religion. My findings show that most people perceive the younger generations as liberal in the workplace and when it comes to their relationship with religion, and the older generations more conservative when it comes to their workplace values and relationship with religion. The younger generations tend to be more expressive and controversial than older generations. Therefore, employers need to create a safe space for these differences and encourage collaboration. Organizations need to recognize that these differences exist in order to attract and retain talent and to create and maintain a positive reputation. The younger generation is stepping into their careers with a different set of skills than that of baby boomers, such as technology skills. And they also have a more modern look on life, such as prioritizing a work-life balance and valuing personal and professional development. Baby boomers prioritize job security and stability. As mentioned, some of the research used was based outside of the US, and I learned that generational differences exist even where the culture and politics is different than in the US. In terms of generational differences in the context of religion, research shows that family, personal beliefs, historical events all influence the relationship with religion. For example, a research study that focused on the impact of teenagers living in an area where their parents' religion is common versus teenagers living in an area where their parents' religion is less common concluded that there were two main factors that influenced that impact the teenagers' religion affiliations, how religious their parents are and how common or popular their religion is in the area in which they reside. Teenagers that live in an area in which their parents' religion is shared by a small community rather than a large community are less likely to be religious or identify with their parents' religion. Teenagers that live in an area where the religion is shared by a greater population are more likely to be religious or identify with their parents' religion. Another factor that impacts religious values are historical events, such as 9/11 and the COVID-19 pandemic, which were monumental and deeply impacted the mental health of a lot of people in the US and drove people closer to religion and spirituality. My research talked about age diversity and how companies are hiring employees of all ages. And because of this, organizations need to recognize what impacts religion as society is always changing, so religious views will change. In terms of religion in the workplace, research shows that personal growth and development is a priority for a lot of employees today, and religion is part of personal growth and development. Survey results show that religion impacts employee performance and day-to-day life, which is why it's important for companies to provide an environment for employees to be able to practice their spiritual and religious beliefs. Some research shows that challenges that can be faced by companies, such as political backlash, but it would make it worth the success of the company to be able to attract and retain talent. One of the research articles used was based in the UK and focused on Christians and Muslims. And this research argued that spirituality and religion can help employees overcome difficult challenges in the work environment and produce an ethical work climate where employees care for the well-being of others. Based on my research, organizations must find ways to incorporate religion into their culture to increase job satisfaction and improve company culture. They can create initiatives that support religions, provide spaces and offices for employees to practice their religion and spirituality, provide an environment where it is safe to talk or represent one's religion. They must also recognize and accommodate the generational differences as they hire employees of different ages. Organizations can also learn better ways to incorporate religion into their culture by engaging with employees and gathering insight on ways to do this. By doing this, they are more likely to attract and retain good talent and improve overall performance and reputation.
Do we have time for one question?
So I'm curious, when it comes to like the holiday schedule of companies, they often rely on the Christian calendar or federal holidays. In your research, did you find any ways that companies can recognize the spiritual practices of other religions through time off or through company celebrations, or was there anything to do with like specific time off?
I did not focus on that, but what I've observed is that there now companies are celebrating holidays that haven't been celebrated in the past. So, but I did not include that.
Downing. Congratulations, NA.
Am I going in the right order?
That was great.
Hi.
Okay, Bob from New York. That's right. So, how many people here know Ricardo? Raise your hand. Okay, so you'll probably recognize this. Ricardo is a guy that, at least I found, first impression has this kind of island vibe. He's kind of relaxed, he's kind of sunny, it's kind of everything's cool, no worries kind of thing. That's kind of when you first meet him. And what I was not prepared for is that this guy is an absolute tiger. I mean, this guy is serving in the U.S. military from the Middle East. He was calling in the class.
Yes.
He was calling in every class. He was doing his work. We come together, and he mentions, his advisor for his paper, and I said, well, let's kind of work backward from the end. Let's figure out what this calendar looks like. He comes back with a week-by-week calendar. I said, I've graded this thing like 100 times. And then he gives me these draft papers, and I kind of push it maybe a couple feet ahead. So, okay, thanks, Professor. Comes back, it's like 4 miles ahead, and every single thing he's just running way ahead. This guy has got great talent, at least for workplaces I've been part of. He will be a tremendous success. I just want to say thank you for letting me be your advisor, and especially thank you for your service to our country. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. How do I feel introduction like that?
No pressure.
But first and foremost, thanks to everybody in this room. But I mean, everybody who have guided me throughout this process. I started this project on active duty orders in COVID-19, driving, doing presentations in class, and Professor Miller is like, pull over. And he took me to the Middle East, and I'm back in New York. But it's been an amazing journey, and I'm here. Me sitting here today wouldn't be who I am without you guys. So thank you very much. So my capstone focused on basically antisemitism on college campuses, and I thought that we had a crisis going on, and it basically stemmed from watching 3 Ivy League presidents presenting at the congressional hearing, and it may ruffle a lot of feathers, but in doing this project, what happened was that I got to learn more, and I think based on what I've been taught over the last 2 years, I'm able to add to the field and to probably lead, whatever institution it is, to make the better decisions moving forward. So that's one of the motivations that kind of guided me to embarking on this project. When I started 3 months ago, I never knew that it would have been so relevant today as it is right now. And I saw it as a crisis that's happening that we failed to identify, that's been happening for the last 10 years or more, and something that's still very current and relevant today. And I think we are missing the big picture when we're addressing it as an institution, but also on a local level, just amongst ourselves. So these clippings are clippings that we're all familiar with, that we saw, and I know you guys probably have different takes on it, but it basically set the background to what motivated me to embark on this journey. So these were the presidents presenting at the congressional hearing, and some people may say they did a good job, others may say they did a terrible job, to each his own interpretation. But for me, I felt like they did not an outstanding job in addressing the issue. For me, they didn't read the room. They didn't realize the sensitivity of the issue they were speaking on, and for that, they missed the mark. We also have all seen the headlines as well recently with what's happening in our local community. And once again, I thought that the institution as itself missed the mark to what is really happening when it comes to antisemitism on college campuses or in the academia on a whole. So for me, some of the limitations that before I started this project were I had to identify, what was the restraints of me embarking on this. So for me, it was time constraint. I had 3 months, probably less, to do this capstone project. So that was a time constraint, that was not a limitation. It's real world applicability. It's something that's happening right now. It's not static, it's ongoing. It's been going on for years. And it's something that changes every day. How we approach it, how we engage it has been changing. Also, there's still a lot of lack of data that's on the issue because it's still developing. There's still a lot of data that is emerging every day and the landscape still changes. And also the access to information. These 3 institutions that I decided to study, which was Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, they are private institutions. So accessing data that they use to navigate this crisis that they were experiencing was very hard to access. And also, basically, the motivations behind how they gather these data or these information, I was unable to get those to make a fair assessment on the information at hand. So as the approach I took, I looked at Comm's and author page as a tool lens to which I wanted to analyze and go through the whole thing as a crisis. So I had to establish why anti-Semitism was a crisis first. So actually what a crisis is, because this qualifies a crisis, and then I'll look at how these institutions address the issue over the years. And through doing that now, basically say, hey, we do have a crisis. What are the challenges that these colleges face in addressing it? Whether it be academic freedoms, university as a business, that's a challenge. It might also be freedom of speech, has also been a challenge over the year. And it's also just basically, it's conversation, civility, it's a challenge as well. So those were some of the things that guide the project or guide me throughout the whole paper. Some of my findings was that most colleges didn't identify the crisis. This thing has been happening on our campus for more than 20 years. But no college has separately said, hey, we have been experiencing a crisis, and identify that as a crisis, and then put necessary infrastructure or tools in place to address it as such. There's also been a lack of poor communication when it comes from academia in terms of our presidents and lower on, of the way they respond to it. We have been more reactive than proactive on the issue. So for instance, at Columbia, or when the Hamas attack happened in October 7, colleges took 24 to 40 hours to respond. And when this is a geopolitical issue that's affecting our own constituents here on campus. So the communication has been slow. Also, the way they've categorized the incidents that have been happening. Colleges have said, oh, it's acts of vandalism. It's more than vandalism. It's actually anti-Semitism that's actually been happening. There's also a lack of accountability. When students break college policies or college rules or laws, or whatever, we don't hold them accountable. We brush it to the side. It's being investigated by, campus police, and that's it. We never hear what happens after the fact. So that lack of accountability that happens. And once again, basically, we've been reactive to the issue because we failed to identify that we are experiencing this, we're going through it. Also, when it comes to you Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, it's a multifaceted issue. So there's a legal aspect to it, there's a social aspect, there's a cultural aspect. So they don't see it as something that's very multifaceted. So, they just saw it as a legal question when they approached Congress, but they didn't realize that, hey, yes, we may be going to speak to Congress, but it's not a legal question that we're going to address. We're going to address a cultural and a social issue that's affecting us, something that's happening directly on campuses across this nation and globally. Also, one of the flaws was DEI. DEI, I know, has been a huge topic over the years. From doing this research, I realized that DEI fell short when it comes to antisemitism. It didn't address it. When I looked at Harvard, Penn, and MIT, and even other campuses, no DEI statement was inclusive enough to basically address this issue. Also that came up in the research was that colleges that had DEI programs, they didn't have a enforcing mechanism to basically approach stuff. So they were just there for show and tell, basically. Just say, oh yeah, we have it. And then DEI doesn't mean because we're diverse that we're tolerant to an issue. All these colleges, or these specifically 3 colleges, they're very diverse across the structure, from classrooms to the teachers, the academic, they're really diverse. But DEI doesn't mean that because we're diverse, that means we're tolerable to the next person's view. And that's one of the things that we've kind of missed the mark, or academia has missed the mark on the issue. Some of the data that came up during the research was pre-October 7th of the terrorist attack. You could see there was almost 140% increase of anti-Semitic act on college campuses. After that happened, the number doubled. So it goes into question to see that this thing is really happening across our college campuses. I identified 5 recommendations, but something that the presidents from Harvard, Penn, and MIT didn't do, I'm going to make sure I do it now. These are general recommendations, but you have to read the room. You have to know your audience. I think that's one of the biggest takeaway in doing this research, that you have to know your audience and you have to read the room. You have to know how to approach it. It's never a legal question or a social issue. It's read the room and approach it on that level. It does lay the foundation for future research. As I say, it's an ongoing issue. The situation changes daily, emotion changes the situation, and it can be studied further because we have not yet found the answer. So this project basically helps me to say, okay, here's the basic foundation because we've identified as a crisis. We identified the shortfalls. Now, how do we take it further? And that is my conclusion on my project.
Okay, we have time for one question, so make it a tough one.
And I may not have the answer.
So I suppose it's more a question of clarity. So when you say the schools didn't view the anti-Semitism as a crisis, as an external crisis, or as a crisis for like the students at the school?
Both. It's a geopolitical issue. It's something that happens on a local level, but it's influenced by events on a global scale. So they miss the mark on internally to see, hey, my constituents have experience in this issue. Students going to classes are being harassed or targeted, and they didn't see it on a global level as well. So they missed the mark on both levels.
So essentially, schools should insert themselves into the conversation, basically.
They have to.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank
you. You get a cup for that.
All right. You there? Oh, all right. So I've got notes on my phone, so I don't forget what I want to say. I'm here to introduce William. Anybody know William? I did not know William before this semester, but we got to know each other pretty fast, talking about sports and activism and social justice and everything in between. So I want to speak a little bit about his project, which I find really compelling and also sort of pushing forward the conversation about advocacy in the context of sports. There are two things I like about this comparative case study he's going to present between women's tennis and the U.S. national women's soccer team. It's hard for me to say. And the two things I find really compelling, number one, for anyone that knows me, William is engaging rigorously with questions of pay, professionalism, how sports players, also known as athletes, engage with their employers, their sponsors, the leagues they participate in order to kind of get justice among different gender groups. And number two, I really like the way William will contrast between different kinds of sports, particularly individual sports like tennis and team sports, particularly soccer, and looking into ways that this kind of advocacy around things like wages, around things like support, differs between, it's one person doing it and a whole team. So I'm going to shut up and let William take the floor.
Thank you. So first of all, anyone who spent more than 10 minutes with me ends up in a sports conversation. So welcome to the club. So before we get started, show of hands, anyone knows who Caitlin Clark is? All right, so there you go. So Caitlin Clark is the biggest sports phenomenon to come out of college sports in the ages. It's interesting though, because when Caitlin Clark signed her rookie contract with the WNBA, she was guaranteed about $750,000 over 4 years. In contrast to when Victor Wembanyama signed his rookie contract with the San Antonio Spurs, his rookie contract is $55 million over 4 years. So that brings us into what we're looking at. And that is the gender wage gap. Specifically, I'm looking at a comparative analysis of using advocacy to bridge the gender wage gap in sports. So overall, we're looking at celebrity activism, sports activism, and in that sports activism, there are several issues that come to bear that greatly influence the gender wage gap. One of the main issues is the issue of representation. So women are shown in sports media on average 4% of the time. It spikes in Olympic years, but it's been steady over the last 30 years at 4% of representation for women in team sports. Not team sports, but women in sports generally. So one of the tools that can be used to bridge this gap are protests, activism. So as I mentioned before, it's a huge wage gap. And a part of why that wage gap is so large is that the people who control the media, quote unquote, control the media, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but in this case, it actually is true. The media is predominantly white, male controlled. So in this case, we can effectively say the people who control the media tend to use a particular playbook. Melanie Joyce calls it the power arcade, and in that sense, she says it's the controlling group using a power over structure to determine how the controlled group is received. Chandra Nair goes a bit further by calling it a white system, for lack of a better term. So to analyze how the system worked, we're looking at Venus Williams and the US women's national team. Venus Williams for how her activism helped to bridge the wage gap in a single sport, in a single player sport, and the US women's national team for how their activism helped to bridge the wage gap in a team sport. So we'll start with Venus Williams. And Venus Williams kind of had a big helping hand from Billie Jean King. So if you don't know who Billie Jean King is, she is a professional player. She was the women's #1 player in the 1970s. She is outside of her playing competitive women's tennis, she's famous for the Battle of the Sexes, where she challenged a former #1 player to a tennis match, and she won. So she had grounds to argue with the US Open to bridge that gender wage gap. The year when she won the first women's US Open, she was paid 40 cents to the dollar that the men earned. So fast forward to 2005, Venus Williams is one of the most famous and successful players in the world. She has won multiple Wimbledon titles, multiple US Open titles, multiple French Open titles, and multiple Australian Open titles, the big four. At the time in 2005, when she started her activism in 2008, 1998. In 1998, by 2005, she was turning heads. She was invited to speak at the table with the organizers. But when her quiet activism, so to say, was kind of unheard, she decided to take it to the media. She wrote a first-person essay in the UK Times that essentially told the people of the United Kingdom, and by extension the world, that Wimbledon, the All England club, were treating women tennis players like second-class citizens. And that helped to drive her advocacy home to the people who applied the pressure to the All England club. And by 2007, they announced that Wimbledon and Roland Garros, the French Open, would be offering equal pay to both men and women prize winners. And in a fortunate twist of fate, Venus Williams won the first equal pay Wimbledon women's title. So moving on from 2008, we could see that her advocacy had a big impact on women's tennis. In 2008, only 3 of the top earning women's players in the world were tennis players. By 2020, the top 10 earning women's players in the world were tennis players. Now, moving on to the US women's national soccer team. This is one of the most successful teams in history. Not just women's teams, but teams. They have won the most Women's World Cup. Only Brazil has won more World Cups in general than the women's national team. Brazil has been competing in the World Cup since 1930. The first Women's World Cup was held in 1990. Yeah. So, but despite their just enormous success, up until 2022, they were still earning significantly less than the US men's counterparts. So in 2015, after they won their 3rd world title, they decided that they were going to take their bosses to court. Unfortunately, their legal arguments failed in court, but their social arguments had a big impact. Many of these players, we can see here, I bet a lot of people know who this is. That's Megan Rapinoe. A lot of these women became bona fide social superstars. And they leveraged their position in society, plus they were extremely savvy with the media to crank up the pressure on their bosses. And in 2022, their bosses eventually relented and agreed to a collective bargaining agreement that paid the women the same as the men, and also introduced a lot of benefits that the men had for years that the women just didn't have, like chartered flights. So this is a success that opened the door for not only the women's national team, but several other US-based teams like hockey teams, surfing teams, and also teams around the world. The French team reached out and asked how they could do similar. The Swedish national team, New Zealand's national team, England's so they set a basis. And in addition, FIFA took notice in the last Women's World Cup. In addition to more than doubling the prize money, FIFA announced that 45% of the prize money would go directly to the players instead of the federations. So women around the world who play soccer are benefiting from the US women's protests. So the crux of my paper was to compare and contrast the different approaches from Venus Williams and the US women's national soccer team. And 2 of the big ones that stood out is that both Venus Williams and the women's national soccer team leveraged their fame to gain public support, a lot of public support. And they leveraged that public support through savvy use of media. For Venus Williams, she quite effectively used the UK Times. And for the women who came about a generation later, they were social media rock stars. And both of them targeted institutional change. Venus Williams was determined to get the change on paper. And the US women kind of did something similar when they were determined to take their bosses to court to get the change also on paper. A big difference though is that Venus Williams was targeting a smaller leadership base. The 4 opens kind of worked hand in hand. And she had a leg up thanks to Billie Jean King. The difference with the US women though is that even though they got success with their bosses, soccer governance is so much more decentralized that you have to go through many levels to influence systematic change. Now, even though in the end both kind of won, there is still a lot more to be done. If you look at Caitlin Clark and the disparity between what she's getting and what Victor Wembanyama is getting, that's a good starting point. The research indicates that of the 50 highest paid celebrities, of the 50 highest paid athletes in history, only one is a woman. And you will get no prizes for guessing which sport that woman played. But it's not Venus, it's her sister, Serena. And it's interesting, there are 4 tennis players, all men, who are paid higher than Serena, or who have made more money than Serena in tennis. Also, there's still a big discrepancy in team sports. If we use soccer as an example, the highest paid women's soccer player in the world in 2023, Alex Morgan, she made $7 million through salary and sponsorships in 2023. For comparison, the highest paid male soccer player in the world made $200 million in salary and sponsorship in 2023. And one of the things that we need to look at is that the advocacy has proven to be effective at the top of the game, where these Uber superstars can leverage their status, their popularity, and yes, and their media savvy to effect change at the top. But as we can clearly see, we need more trickle down to lower reaches of the game, of several games, before we can truly start to bridge the gender wage gap. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Mitchell?
You want me to ask a question?
I figured. I thought you had.
No, I'll ask this because I'm an old school free marketer. This is a 2-part question. I presume that those of these media moguls who control these sports teams and TV teams, I presume they just want to make money. They're shameless capitalists, right? Okay, good. I thought that's what you were going to say. Now I wonder why in the world it is that if the American people wanted to watch, does anyone know what the women's NBA team in New York is? Liberty. But why aren't as many people watching the Liberty, the women playing in Liberty at the?
There are that many people watching Liberty play basketball. The research does suggest that viewership in basketball doubled from 2022 to 2023. Viewership in soccer is on the rise. As we can see by viewership from this season's NCAA finals, the women were watching more than the men.
So finals, right. I will stand completely corrected in this room. If it is a true fact that the average attendance at a Liberty game is anywhere near the average attendance at a Knicks game. If that is true, I am wrong. And I do not think that is anywhere close to being true. Not even in the ballpark. Pardon me.
Is that a question? Yes, I agree that the averages are, there is a discrepancy in the averages low, but those discrepancies are from systematic depression of
people are forcing women not to go.
It's not just that, but if you invest less in a product and then you say the product is inferior, you're kind of undermining your own argument as to why it's inferior because you don't spend on it. The research, all right, for example, the MLS, when the MLS started, the MLS was losing money for more than a decade, yet people pumped money into the MLS before it became profitable. The same was never done for the women's game.
Right. I wonder how profitable the MLS is.
So we're gonna kind of keep with that sports metaphor, and we're gonna do a 7th-inning stretch. Okay, so how about we just take 2-3 minutes, stand up, stretch, I taught aerobics in the 80s. So let's just make sure they're getting very close. And I'm trying to we have
Yo, man.
4 more here and then just 2 more on couple in.
I didn't get that.
So our next advisor, I will let her introduce.
Thank you, Professor. I want to start with a shout out to say thank you, and I really honor all of the graduates today because learning from my students, especially Kimberly, I know you all, some of you, or many of you work full time as you work really, really hard to produce this top-notch work. So let's recognize that. Yeah. All right, let's start actually with a 2-second fun survey. Close your eyes and imagine your favorite sport player or celebrity.
Sports celebrity.
Sports player or sports celebrity. 1, 2. Open your eyes. Now raise your hand if it's a woman. Look around, please. Please look around. Yes. Right? So this is an amazing segue from William's presentation to Kimberly. Because Kimberly explores the taken for granted male-dominated sports industry and investigates how women fight for their place through marketing, right? And she does, not like William, but connecting William, right? William talked about pay and those material aspects. She says that representation matters in generating those pay, those material stuff, right? And she studied especially using a method called critical discourse analysis, which she will explain later, which really takes for taken for granted things like what we see out there, slogans, colors, images, songs, that we're not aware, but actually those places are sites of domination as well as sites of resistance. Kimberly and I thank Professor Yuri Young for serving as a leader. And Kimberly, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Professor Subianto and Professor Yang for helping me and guiding me here. I would like to thank God for allowing me to be here because I would not be here without him. I would like to thank the support of my parents, my siblings, my grandparents who are watching right now from Puerto Rico. Te quiero. As well as my boyfriend who's here. Thank you for your support. And I think besides our parents and our family, our partners are always there for us. So he's been there through everything, my stress, my dramaticness, everything. So thank you. Okay, so let's get into this. As you know, I think a few of you guys like sports. I like sports as well. So the topic of my thesis is representing women in the male-dominated industry, a critical discourse analysis of the USA's women's national soccer team and its marketing practices. So just to give a little background, Title IX was passed in 1972, and it allowed women equal opportunities for competitive physical activity. Before this, women were limited when it came to participating in sports. And what they were mostly partaking was more recreational. So they focused mostly on just physical healthiness, making sure they're good, but nothing really about sports-wise. The USA's national soccer team began to form in 1985, thanks to a few women who had a dream to become an Olympic sport one day. That never existed before then. So thanks to them, their efforts, they laid a foundation for the team that exists today. And they have proven that the world, that there are good players in soccer. And you can see that because they won 4 championships. The men have won 0. So that says a lot. Despite their efforts and wins, there's still a lack of media coverage when it comes to women's sports team. Sports are supported through investors, endorsements, and sponsorships. So ultimately, a lack of media coverage leads to less investors. Less investors means to less endorsements, leads to less money, which leads to no women's sports eventually. As for my methodology, I chose to do critical discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis is used to approach data through critical description, interpretation, and conceptualizing information to capture any themes or patterns. CDA also concentrates on the discourse of power abuse, injustice, and inequality, and it seeks to discover the hidden messages that are being transmitted. I decided to analyze 2 advertisements from the USA's women's national soccer team. The first one being a Nike's commercial called Dream With Us, which aired in 2019 after the World Cup. And the second advertisement is a video from their YouTube channel called Behind the Crest. The YouTube channel video is a more non-traditional way of advertisement, since it essentially takes you on a day-to-day basis on what the team does and goals and so on. I decided to analyze the advertisements because there are so many ways a message can be transmitted and interpreted. The way the words are set up, the visuals, the images, and sound effects partake in the message that is brought forth. An example that came to mind to understand how CDA in advertisement is music artists. When they produce music videos for their songs, the video is supposed to bring to life their ideas, their feelings, essentially the message of the song. So the way they are dressed, the location, the dances that are created, they all serve a purpose. And you, being the fan, begin to interpret what the artist is trying to convey. In the same way, advertisements are messages they are trying to bring to the public. So some key findings. Both advertisements brought different messages. The Nike commercial focused on empowering little girls who want to be part of the sports industry and encouraging them to be the next generation that is going to make a change. Their message emphasized the different females that were in the ad. So it focused on color, skin, the background, their culture, their ethnicity. The video spoke about stereotypes and biases that the sport have regarding women and emphasizing on equality between men and women in sports. The second advertisement, the YouTube video, it brought forth more of a raw footage of who the team is, and you were able to see the interaction between the teammates and the coaches. It was more of a behind the scenes, so that's what they call it, behind the scenes press video, where it's more authentic and you can see a mix of emotions and feelings. As I analyzed the video, they were intentional in putting specific scenes. For example, recording the sports commentators. Some of them were in different accents, so you heard different people speaking. So you heard Spanish people, you heard a British accent, you heard an American accent. So it was very important for them to portray those different types of backgrounds and cultures regarding women's sports. The Nike advertisement focused on the injustices in the sports industry and what the woman must go, how they're seen or portrayed. The YouTube video focused on the team's values, who they are as a team, how they treat each other behind the scenes, and the pep talks and the speeches that they were brought all serve as a way to capture the audience attention and relatable to them. Overall, this research addresses the disparities that women in the industry face and express their willingness to fight to better themselves as well as lead by examples for the next generation to come. Thank you.
All right, we can take one question. Two questions. Didn't even fill the time. All right. No questions? Then
Thank you so much. Put your slides up. All right. I get the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. I have to say, in the most wonderful way, I've just never had as much fun having conversations and learning from a student throughout this whole process. Just, Christine's done just amazing work looking at issues of dating in the Black community, interviews, fascinating, but also just done it with such a sense of joy and a sense of really passion for what she's studying. And that's just been an absolute delight to be a part of. So I will turn things over. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine McKetney. I want to start off by saying thank you to Professor Mebded for not only being my advisor, but like the free therapy dump session on all my dating escapades. Professor Glover for offering the class that sparked this idea in Power, Privilege, and Difference. And just knew that researching dating was my thing. So she was like, go for it. And then my parents for being here. Thank you guys. My friends and my interview participants who are watching online. Here we go. So my research topic is navigating social cultural dynamics in dating, the privileges and disadvantages experienced with the Black community. Bear with me, my notes are on my laptop. Okay, so my research question is, what are the social cultural factors that are affected Black individuals as described in their dating experience? And how can we understand the challenges and privileges they encounter in dating and forming relationships? In today's world, the idea of finding yourself in a healthy romantic encounter has been equivalent to spotting a unicorn for Black individuals pursuing connections. In normal circumstances, dating is how people can get to know one another's personalities, interests, friends, family, values, and aspirations. It encourages people to evaluate compatibility, emotional connections, and the possibility of more committed relationships or even marriage. What was once a social activity where two people, typically with romantic intentions, spend time together to get to know one another, has now turned into a battleground with rejection, vulnerability, and grappling with uncertainty. The purpose of my project is to identify the social cultural factors that influence Black individuals' dating experience, understanding the challenges and privileges that encounter in forming relationships, and explore the perceptions of the social cultural advantages and disadvantages within the Black community. The research goal is to identify the social cultural effects, describe their dating experience, and to understand the challenges and privileges they encounter. So, as you can tell, there was a lot of gaps. So trying to pull together research on why Black love is not flourishing, it was easier to identify the gaps. One of the gaps was misrepresentation of healthy Black relationships across various media platforms, i.e. social media, television, and film. Boundaries and priorities, prioritizing personal well-being and safety, and the economic disparities. The research gap is understanding Black individuals' dating experiences are multifaceted and consist of issues with media representation, societal pressures, and personal boundaries. Addressing these gaps require a holistic approach that considers the intersectionalities of race, culture, and social economic factors. Further research can contribute to supporting healthy and fulfilling dating experiences by Black individuals. My study aims to do this by asking the two questions that I brought in the beginning. So what are the social cultural privileges and disadvantages? And how do Black individuals who participate describe their dating experience? The methodology. So the methodology in this study was an organized approach to conduct research and gather, analyze, and interpret data from Black individuals involved in dating. This process began with a review of existing research, including literature, social media, and podcasts, to understand the broader context of dating and what identify instances where Black individuals were either discussed or overlooked. Following this review, I interviewed 17 people, a little bit more, but 17 people got the work done to hear about their firsthand accounts of their dating experience. This approach allowed for me to collect personal stories and insights, focusing on the challenges and advantages. The interviews lasted between 45 to 60 minutes. Sometimes I had to cut people short to talk about dating. It was 14 semi-structured questions, just narrating the memorable experiences around dating, describing a fulfilling or challenging aspect, how they racially identify, and how those influence their encounters, how they perceive healthy Black relationships on social media or on television, and also their historical context in dating. Like, have you seen your parents married? Are your siblings married? What does that look like, and how does that transcribe in your everyday dating life? The literature review findings. So I touched on a lot of books
Thank you, my dad. Thank you, Claire. A lot of podcasts, a lot of social media posts. But what I narrowed it down to is social stratification, historical influences on marriage beliefs, personal and privileges and predictors, all about love, perspectives from bell hooks, labor of love, the cost of romantic love among first-year college women, and podcasts and social media conversations. So for those who are not familiar with social stratification, it's basically our ranking system in society. And for me, I know in the Black community, I don't know how often we think about how we are ranked, but how do we think about that when we're ranked amongst one of another, and how that impacts our dating experience, right? So how does that impact our wage earning, our social economic factors, our education, our social status? For the historical influence on marriage beliefs, just observing your upbringing in your home, how that intersects with dating among Black individuals, reveals historical perspective and how it affects your modern views of marriage. The personal and privileges as predictors was kind of interesting. I learned that there is an actual probationary relational style that describes a specific approach to pattern of behavior in romantic relationships. So understanding that as a broader context and how the further research encourages people to explore patterns in your relationship. All About Love, Bell Hooks, great book. It explores the representation of love in modern day society, questioning the prevailing notions that it is primarily an emotional, rather intentional act that demands conscious effort when you're dating. Labor of Love actually challenges, does anyone even date anymore? In 2013, they said courting is dead. So we feel that in 2024, suggesting that what was once a pursuit of true love has evolved into a transactional activity. And then the cost of romantic love among first-year college women, which was kind of interesting when reading, because it definitely examined a lot of white women in the 1970s and 1980s and how their education also tied to their social status and how they can marry off and be great. But I know in the Black community, it was actually encouraged for you not to date when you're going to school and just finish your degree, and then everything else will fall in place. And then podcasts and social media conversations, just trying to digest different perspectives, whether it's a healthy relationship or disrespectful, infidelity, and why is that being the dominating trend on social media. Participant findings. So as I said, I interviewed 17 people, and from transcribing a lot of data, I came up with themes, 4 themes actually. So the first theme was knowing my worth. This theme emerged because a lot of participants expressed how societal and cultural norms set expectations that romantic men just don't exist. That went along with the belief that grand gestures and dating was only reserved for those in those official relationships. And in response to these perceived social limitations, one participant said, I will no longer lower my expectations or my worth. So in this age where self-worth can be influenced by the treatment of or validity of others, women demand and are expecting more, which isn't a new concept for men. So then that leads to the 50-50 conversation, where a lot of men either have this idea that they are the provider and they should be the provider, but then some men just think that this idea of having this financial burden in today's social economic status with inflation is just not realistic, especially when a participant said that, I know a girl that would take less. So that is the running theme of how Black women navigate dating dynamics with confidence and autonomy. But for Black men, they navigate dating with money and who can carry societal expectations regarding their masculinity and their provider role. Next was the media portrayals of Black relationships and how the representation has a huge effect on what we perceive. So we just think healthy relationships don't exist. A lot of my participants talked about how back in the day we had Bill Cosby and Martin and Gina and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And now when you look for a sitcom with just 2 heterosexual Black relationships, they no longer exist. So it just doesn't leave room for the conversation of like, do healthy relationships in the Black community exist? And what does that look like? Because if you go on social media, then the conversation is tied to 50-50. Why would I date her? Why would I go to a committed relationship? Especially if you don't have the historical context of marriage in your household, which is my last theme. A lot of my interviews had a different background and family, whether they saw two parents growing up, whether they didn't. It all tied to what they believe personally. So a lot of, I don't even want to call out gender, but a lot of different participants said that they adopt the belief that their parent put in their household. So if your parent is telling you, I don't need anyone and I can do this by myself, then you automatically, or it's hypothesized that you think that you don't need anybody and you can do it on your own. Versus when you see two parents do it together, it's hypothesized that you would rather do it with someone than do it by yourself. Back to further discussions and research. I decided that because there is so much to digest within the gaps, it's easier to continue the conversation focusing on religion, disabilities, interracial dating, sexuality, and nationality. So in summary, both my research findings and existing literature highlight the interplay of social cultural facts in describing the dating experience within the Black community. Interviews revealed that there's alignment in financial disparities, historical context of Black marriage, and the influence of societal and media representations on romantic pursuit. However, there is a notable gap in research discussing the Black dating experience. Further research should explore the nature of dating among Black individuals and address the challenges that are experienced in the Black romantic pursuit. So one of them could be examining the roles of religious beliefs and practice and shaping attitudes towards dating and romantic relationships among Black individuals. Another one can be exploring the experiences of Black individuals navigating the dating world and forming connections while living with a disability. Another one can be investigating how interracial datings impact the wealth gap between Black individuals and their racial counterparts. Another one can be exploring the dynamics of Black LGBTQ relationships and Black polyamorous relationships in the context of the dating experience. And lastly, we can investigate how cultural backgrounds, such as being a Black American versus Caribbean American or African or Black immigrant influences dating experiences within the Black community. And that
is one question. Time for one question.
So to some degree, this falls under like adolescent psychology, what you were talking about with the historical context of marriage, right? During your literature review and your initial studies, did you come across any details of like what parents can be doing for their children to set a good example for what a healthy relationship is?
No, not necessarily. I tied it back to like the historical context of how we couldn't the Black community couldn't legally be married for a certain time and how that trickled down. And then by the 1960s, it was just a decline of African American like formal marriages. So I didn't tie it to like how the nuclear household operates and how that impacts you when you go out into the dating world, but I did like tie it down to like historical context of like us not being able to be legally married.
All right.
All right. You ready?
Absolutely. Go.
All right. So, for those of us who have taught, I don't know. Oh, yeah. I was ready. Oh my God.
No, it's all good.
Thank you for being careful. All right, ready? Slow down, everybody. So, for those of us who have been professors before, have taught graduate classes, you often have at least one student in your class, the first time you have them, you're like, damn, I wish that student would ask me to be there. And that student in my class 2 years ago was Tanisha. And the other thing about Tanisha that I really want to note is that what I did, I went to grad school for 5 years and then I dropped out of a PhD program and started another PhD program. The way I got through the second PhD program was actually making the classes I took work towards my dissertation. And one thing I can really applaud Tanisha for, which I frankly haven't seen that much, is that she used her coursework to kind of work her way to this project. Whether it was looking at storytelling and how storytelling can empower marginalized voices and research methods, or in my cultures of work class, looking at collective sense making and how power dynamics play out in terms of sense making within an organization. Tanisha really has worked her way methodically and rigorously through this curriculum. And tonight she's going to treat us to her thesis presentation, which is looking at a role that I was not familiar with, but she is very, very familiar with, and that is the Chief Communications Officer within an organization. So, Tanisha, please.
Thank you. My name is Tanisha Millett, and that's like the 14th person on the list. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll get right to it. So when a company or organization invests in diversity, equity, and inclusion, most people think it's a human resources initiative. But there is a critical role that the communications team can play in this work. A communications team can impact an organization's DE&I work with its messaging and its storytelling. More than creating content that's memorable or impactful, communications teams should also produce content that doesn't rely on dominant cultural narratives that either erase or inaccurately portray the full experience of different communities or are framed on assumptions based on about different communities. The study makes the case that today's chief communications officer has a powerful position within organization, and that makes this person the one who should lead shifts in organizational culture and processes to lead communications teams in this work. If an organization is serious about its commitment to promoting equity and inclusion, it should understand how the use of harmful narratives and dominant assumptions about communities can impact those efforts. And I'm a little slow on the slide. All right, so taking a look at my methodology, there were 2 research questions that guided my research. The first was, in what ways does the Chief Communications Officer shape how an organization develops its messaging and stories? And the second was, what can impact the ability of the Chief Communications Officer to lead efforts on messaging and storytelling? And to answer my research questions, I interviewed 5 chief communications marketing officers, and they were in different fields so that I could get their experiences in the role. The interview subjects were chosen based on the following criteria. They were at the director or highest level of their departments. They regularly engage with the CEO, president, or executive leadership team, and they led the team that was responsible for their organization's messaging and storytelling. I created an in-depth, semi-structured style interview, asking questions that tested my assumptions about the role and to see if they were in fact the key role to making these shifts. The goal was to let them share their experiences, including their interactions with their teams, how they led their teams, and their relationship with the CEO and executive leadership. One of the things that was not a criteria is that they had actually done this work. However, one of the CCOs that I interviewed was quite candid about her experience of acknowledging that their organization had a practice of telling stories about the communities they served in a harmful way. And she led a 3-year process that led them in shifting the culture and processes for how the organization told stories. So as part of the data sample, I wanted to share, this is her words verbatim through this was like almost a 90-minute interview. We had all of these young people telling us the way that you tell your story is hurting our communities and negative to our students. We had to look at the way we were telling the story about the work we do with that community. Do we start from the frame of we want to change the education system or that we are helping these poor students? It was moving from a deficit-based to an asset-based position. And what she went on to say is that she found that the company was relying on something called the savior narrative. So while they were telling a very accurate story of all the help that they were giving public school students, they were also portraying these public school students as broken, that needed their fixing, as opposed to the system being broken, and they were stepping in to give them the supports that they needed. So my key findings, looking at research question number 1, In what ways does the Chief Communications Officer shape how an organization develops messaging and storytelling? Today, the CCO position is revered as a critical strategic partner who is often seen as an advisor and collaborator with the CEO. They have the position to get buy-in and impact how other departments tell their story. This elevated positioning comes with higher level responsibilities, including being the source of truth and accuracy, and letting leadership know when culture and practices need to shift. Based on the CCOs that I spoke with and the experiences that they shared, they led me to believe that I was correct in my assumption that they perhaps have the greatest impact on how an organization develops its messaging and stories. They also have an impact on guiding other areas to ensure that they are speaking with the same voice. For example, if you have a marketing team or a development arm or someone who interacts with government relations, making sure that the same message that you create, that's what they're selling to the same people. Looking at the second research question, what can impact the ability of the Chief Communications Officer to lead these efforts on messaging and storytelling? As powerful as the CCO position is, the CEO and executive leadership can impact the ability of the CCO to lead the charge in shifting narratives. If a CEO has an antiquated view of the role of the Chief Communications Officer, or, this is probably more important, lacks the understanding of the critical role that a comms team plays in advancing an organization's DE&I goals, then the CCO will not have the agency or support needed to do this work. Among some of the recommendations that one, for the interest of time, one of my recommendations that I give to other Chief Communications Officers, they should regularly with their comms team review their content, not only to gauge that the narratives used when telling the story paints the positive picture that they want about the people, products, and services they provide, but also about the communities that they touch with them. And it's not an easy process, but in order to get this right, we really have to do a critical look as Chief Communications Officers. And to fill in the gaps in knowledge, future research could look at this process of making this shift within companies, and also look at how you get a CEO on board and how they work with their Chief Communications Officer in this work. And before I close, I just want to have a couple of acknowledgments. First, to my very enthusiastic advisor. I'm so happy that you accepted my request, but no matter how I came to you every 2 weeks since January, you always left me feeling like I was a rock star, so I thank you for that. And to Dr. Medved, not only for being my reader, but you are such a guiding force in this program, and so it's very good to have been a part of the program. And finally, I want to thank my mother, who is here, Barbara, my sister, for supporting me the past few years and putting up with someone they lovingly called grad school Tanisha. Apparently she's intense and not allowed. And finally, I want to acknowledge my late father, Lewis, who was my first captive audience when I was becoming a journalist, communicated, and I wish he could be here, and I know that he would be proud, so I wanted to acknowledge him.
All right.
Yeah.
We have time for
1, 2. Yeah, we do have.
We have, okay.
Really?
Questions?
I have a question.
Hi,
So, hi, good to see you. So one of the roles of a chief communications officer is to stave off potential crises or to handle crisis communications. And right now we're in an era where there's a lot of backlash against DE&I efforts, and I think about something like the Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney controversy. So do you have any techniques or strategies for CCOs in an era where DE&I is getting so much pushback?
That is a tough one. The first thing that I will say is, and one of the CCOs talked about this, when we were in June of 2020 with all the social upheaval and the unrest, everyone was looking for their chief communications officers. Like, what do we say? Well, how do I say it? And, you know, they didn't want to come off performative. And I would say, if you really want to be a force in this social world, you need to be prepared. And DE&I always tell people it's not about looking at things this way, where you're bringing in people at the bottom who shouldn't be there and you're pulling down the people at the top. It's expansive. It's broadening your scope and it's letting more people in. And why wouldn't you want that?
I think we have one more night.
I had just a quick question. How did you, what were the difficulties in gaining access to a CEO like that?
Let me tell you, it was easier. It was easier than I thought it would be. And many of them came from speakers who came to our class. So if I heard them say, something in class that I thought would lend to this topic, I reached out to the professor. Gibson is a perfect example, one of our speakers in our storytelling class. And quite frankly, I was really reluctant to talk to them and I thought I would be taking up their time. Not one of them spoke to me less than an hour. It was actually kind of cathartic for them to be very candid about the challenges that they have in this role. So it was pretty good.
All right.
Right?
And you might do that sometime in the night? Same. All right, wonderful. Well, again, my pleasure to introduce Juanita. Just a delight to work with her. She did a terrific project that's looking, kind of continuing our conversation a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations, and does a beautiful job of bringing in her own personal experience. We weren't sure how much at first to bring in, but she did it in such a nuanced way and in such a meaningful way. So she was able to talk about women's experiences, Black women's experiences with hair, particularly, and discrimination in the workplace, and did an interview-based study, and it was just an honor to work with you. So thank you so much. Please.
Thank you, Professor. So thank you to Professor Mehta, who was my advisor, and Professor Subdichano, which was my reader. And thank you to all of you guys in the room. I know we've been here for a while, but I'm gonna try to make it interesting and captivate the audience with storytelling. Okay. And also, thank you to all my friends and family online. My mom was texting the group chat, making sure everyone is watching. And she's watching all the way from Dominica, so thank you. Hi, Mommy. Okay, so here we go. An in-depth look at the corporate culture of natural hair. So before we begin, I want to read to you a piece of my introduction to situate your thinking and to erase the thought, just in case it's there, that it's just hair. And also to highlight that this was more of a passion project and less on the thesis side, but still fulfilling the requirement, you know. Okay. Why don't you wear your natural hair more often? It's beautiful and you say you love it, but you don't speak of it as something you love. That was my partner's response after I spent quite a few long minutes explaining to him that hair maintenance was something I could not fit into my busy lifestyle. I worked in an office where I was expected to be in person 4 days a week, and I was not going to wake up earlier in the morning so I could style my hair. That was the main reason I wore braids. After all, it was a time saver and it was convenient. It was very upsetting that he looked skeptical at my explanation. A few months passed, and I did not think of that interaction again. It wasn't until one morning when I tried to style my naturally coily hair at the top right here that conversation returned to the forefront of my brain. The style I initially planned for my coil did not look how I wanted, and I felt this intense fear of showing up to work with untamed hair. In my panic, I grabbed a flat iron and turned it on the highest setting. Curls be damned. I was not going to show up to the office looking like that. My solution worked, and I went to work for the next few weeks with my silky hair, as you can see. And then, you know, it's so convenient that I took a picture. So that's actually the day, September 25th, 2021, that I damaged my curly hair. It's right there, so you can see. So my solution worked, and I went to work for the next few weeks with silky hair. I didn't discover the damage I had done until I washed my hair and the curls did not bounce back. I was devastated. Upon reflection and prompted by my partner's previous observation, I realized that I harbored anxiety about wearing my natural hair at work. I was stuck on this notion that I couldn't go to the office comfortably with my in-between hair. When my hair wasn't braided up or styled, I didn't consider the natural look as a style. My actual hair was a placeholder. Despite my love for its uniqueness, I did speak of it as an inconvenience, masking the deeper unease I felt about how I might be perceived in a professional setting. This revelation was both enlightening and challenging, as it forced me to confront societal norms and expectations that had unconsciously influenced my relationship with my natural hair. It became clear that addressing this anxiety required not only self-acceptance, but also advocating for inclusivity and diversity in workplace environments where natural hairstyles are not just accepted, but celebrated. So the project rationale. Well, in addition to my personal experience, I wanted to do this research to delve into the multifaceted experience encountered by Black women professionals regarding their natural hair, and also to shed light on the complexities of cultural identity, self-expression, and conformity within the corporate context. And so my methodology and analysis. So I interviewed 10 women. The criteria was they had to be in a corporate setting. They were between the ages of 25 to 65, and they self-identified as Black women, either of African descent or Caribbean descent. We conducted interviews on Zoom. They lasted for about 30 to 45 minutes, and I did record them. A lot of them were very hesitant with that, and they did want to remain anonymous, speaking of their experiences at the workplace with their natural hair. But the videos was only used for transcribing purposes. And once I had that data, I looked for the common themes, and I actually found 3 reoccurring themes, which we will get to. The research questions: how do Black women professionals talk about their experience with or knowledge of corporate grooming policies? And also, are corporate grooming policies sensitive to hairstyles historically associated with race or ethnicity? So my findings, the 3 themes that I found was internalized bias, misconceptions of neat hair, and uncertainty of workplace grooming policies. So with the first one, internalized bias. And what do I mean when I say that? It's defeated acceptance of stereotypes and discriminatory attitudes about who they were as Black women professionals. So with the 10 women, I had a diverse bunch, I would say. So I had people who had been in the office for 2 to 5 years, and I had women who were there from 10 years to 20 years. And what I found is that they kind of accepted how their natural hair was perceived. So, and how did that manifest? So there was a lack of confidence with wearing their natural hair to the workplace. Much like me, that panic that I first had, I didn't realize that it was even there until the time came when I had to wear my untamed hair to the office. That type of anxiety of what are people gonna think? And plus, they've never seen my natural hair. So when I walk into the office, what's gonna happen with that? And also, they had discomfort with saying that their natural hair was part of the office look. So I have a quote here from one of the interviewers. She said, "When I first began working full-time officially, I did feel the need to assimilate, meaning to perm my hair and to keep it straight. I don't think it was any kind of pressure from any one individual or any one employer. I think it was just assimilated into professional life." So when she said that, I asked her the follow-up question, why do you think straight hair equals professional life? And she said, just by what you see around, on television in terms of what a professional should look like. At that time, I didn't see too many Black hairstyles. And so everyone advancing typically had very straight hair. So I straightened my hair, and when I didn't wear it out, I wore wigs. Another finding was misconceptions of neat hair. So according to Merriam-Webster, neat is defined as free from dirt and disorder, habitually clean and orderly. So 4 out of the 10 interviews emphasized that they couldn't wear their natural hair freely at work because they had to keep a neat appearance. And so freely here meaning that they couldn't wear their natural curls out, and not necessarily in a disorderly way. It's just that they view their hair as being unneat. Now, as we can see by this definition, these are professional women. One of them is a director of HR. There's no way that she's going to work dirty, right? According to what neat means. But this is the definition that a lot of the women have why they couldn't wear their hair at work, because it wouldn't be considered neat. And another finding, uncertainty of workplace grooming policies. None of the women that I interviewed knew of any language specifically in their workplace policies specific to hair. So what happens then is that the labor is placed on the employee to figure out, how do I show up to this office? Even me personally, when I started the job that I'm in now, I had an interview and my supervisor was a Black woman, but I didn't know what the office was going to look like. So even before getting to the office, I didn't think to ask her, but even before getting to the office, I wondered, at the time I had braids and they were much longer than what I have now. And I thought to myself, how are these people going to look at me? Because I'm fresh, this was undergrad, I'm fresh graduating college, I'm a young Black professional, but I have braids. Now, what does that have to do with anything, you may ask? But that's the burden placed on Black women going into the office, where grooming policies aren't specified. And I have you, in this day and age where diversity and inclusion seems to be such a hot button topic, this oversight is almost unbelievable. Because outside of the research, I actually tried to, the research with the interviewees, I actually tried to Google some company policies about hair specifically, and I couldn't find any. There's nothing specific about hair. And so the conclusion is, it's not just hair. And within the thesis, I talk about this, but this phrase can't be further from the truth, because if you say it's not just hair, then there are Black women who are actually chemically straightening their hair, even though there's now evidence that relaxers do cause health risk, including infertility. But some women, Black women, refuse to not get their hair chemically straightened. And so even with, get their hair chemically straightened because they can't go to work with their hair unstyled or undone, or they think their hair, like myself, I'm still working on it, that their actual hair is an in-between. It's not actually a hairstyle. Also, the policing of Black hair runs deep. I do touch on this more in my thesis, which you can read, Professor Manvite. So historically, even with the slave trade, so one of the first things that the Europeans did when they captured the Africans was to actually shave off their hair. Now, research suggests that this was done for sanitary reasons, but if you know anything about Africa and how they view hair, they actually hold hair in a high standard. So hair can actually indicate someone's age, their marital status, religion, wealth, and rank in the community. So you have all that in your hair, and then someone comes, not only are you enslaved, but then they shave off your hair. So imagine what that feels like, or what that felt like, and it's actually trickling down to today. And also, back to my research question, the Black woman's experience with the grooming policy is maddening because specifics don't exist. So we have that burden to figure it out. So if you are graduating, even from this program, and you're going on a job, unfortunately, that's something that a Black woman has to consider. What is the office environment? How am I going to be able to wear my hair? So just to go back to the first point, it's not just hair. So thank you.
Question, please.
I'm just like, what are we?
What about the band?
What about the? Well, I did not interview anyone, but I'm sure our experiences are similar.
Future
direction. Future directions.
I could relate to a lot of representation in terms of like, I've been on several interviews, and the first thing is like, when the person says at the Comm interview, the first person, what about my hair?
Mm-hmm.
So I could relate.
Thank you so much.
Coming from Mexico and coming from Canada tonight. So, given the economic burden of coming to campus, when you are living so far away,
I normally see.
Rafa and Cynthia are going to present online, so they will show up here in just a second. We won't ask questions, because getting the owl to work and everything is more than I can manage. Oh, I guess the owl is working. The owl is working.
Oh, yeah. That was just so that faces were not obscured.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
just to let you know, you are all now. The owl is working.
Oh.
Hello, someone's family member. Yeah, I don't know if it's don't worry about it. All right, sure. So, well, hello. So, can you hear me, Cynthia?